it's not so much about what's happening on the field right now. It's more this feeling of, you cost me something. You're the reason I'm unhappy.
Hey, welcome to Beat Everyone. I'm Ben Flanagan with AL.com, and we're here, people. It's been another long and grueling offseason, this one filled with endless questions about year 2 of the Kalen DeBoer era. In 2024, it was all about how Alabama football would respond, what it would look like in a post-Nick Saban world. How would Kalen DeBoer do in year 1 with the shadow of the greatest of all time looming over him and the program and the city and all of college football for that matter? After going 9-4 in his debut season, he's ready for sophomore year. And it's significant considering the leaps that he made in year 2 at programs where he coached in the past. Look, on paper, everything looks good. Returning starters on offense and defense, impressive recruiting class. He named Ty Simpson the starting quarterback weeks before the season. Does Alabama have momentum in fall camp? Will this team do what DeBoer couldn't his first season and make the 12-team college football playoff, or even contend for a national championship? We're not going to know about that for a while, but we will know a lot more on Saturday because Alabama kicks off their first game in Tallahassee. They face Florida State, coached by Mike Norvell, coming off a disastrous 2-10 season after his team missed out on the college football playoff in 2023. And who got that spot but Nick Saban and Alabama in his last season there? We've got storylines, we've got burning questions, and we've got predictions later in the show. And helping me work through all this is Beat Everyone producer Matt Scalici and our good friend at AL.com beat writer Nick Kelly. Guys, welcome. It's finally here.
Happy kickoff, guys.
About time. I feel like this offseason, more than maybe most in recent memory, has felt especially long just because you had to wait for Alabama's sake to correct, I think, what went wrong last year. So correct me if I'm wrong there, guys, but this one's felt a little longer.
I'm with you, Nick. It's just I think maybe that sensation of the offseason not being long is probably more closely associated with the years where Alabama had so few questions to answer in the offseason, like you said. I mean, and for a number of years, that is what it felt like, that there was, even if there were some crucial positions that had to be determined, you kind of didn't really feel that anxious about it because it's a consistent coaching staff and you kind of know what to expect from Nick Saban year in and year out. And we're, so much of what's happening now in Tuscaloosa is us all waiting to see what this is going to look like and how this story is going to go. We don't know what normal is yet here.
Well, it kind of reminds me of, like, if you've ever played pickup basketball and you're on the losing end and you felt like you should have done better, you felt like you should have won, and as soon as it's over, you're like, run it back, let's play again. And that was the case last year, where it's like Alabama fell short of everything that was right in front of it, right? And so I think fans were just like, no, like, we want to restart this thing. Like, we don't have a national championship, but we don't have glory to bask in right now. So we want college football to start as soon as it was over. But Nick, Matt, you've been in Nick's position before, but Nick, what's this week like for you? Like, you've milked all the offseason storylines for all they're worth, right? It's just your job to do that, you and Matt Stahl. Is it a big exhale when the season finally kicks off, or is it just a whole new level of stress and anxiety?
Yeah, honestly, this week, I don't want to say I dislike it, but I'm not a huge fan because, to your point, nothing's changed, even though it's a game week. I mean, it's still Florida State's still next on the schedule. Alabama's team still hasn't played a game. So nothing's changed. So you can act like it's different, but really this is just all one big windup to Saturday. So let's get to Saturday. Let's get some actual football to talk about, write about. And to me, it just kind of, this is an especially long week.
Yeah, and so Alabama's going to Florida State, to Tallahassee, and it's been a while since these teams have played. I mean, like, we should probably look back at their history for just a minute. Alabama and Florida State. I mean, it's brief, but Matt, there's history here between two very storied programs. I mean, both with iconic head coaches like Bear Bryant, Bobby Bowden. Then you got Nick Saban coming along. He plays them twice. Jimbo Fisher's the coach. And, he and Saban obviously have their history. Toss in Jameis Winston, toss in Jake Coker, toss in Landon Dickerson. All of these sliding doors between Alabama and Florida State, but they've only played 5 times.
Yeah, and 3 of those were really before I think what anyone would consider the current incarnation of Florida State. I mean, you know, pre 1980s, Florida State was not really a serious program, despite the fact that they actually did tie Alabama back in the 60s at one point under Bear Bryant. But I mean, it was. I think you'll hear a lot of people say they were sort of a homecoming opponent for a lot of bigger programs back then. In the modern era, Alabama and Florida State have met twice. Once in 2007, which was one of the ugliest football games I have ever seen in person. Just an absolute slugfest in Jacksonville. Brutally windy day. I can remember like paper plates with hot dogs flying all over the place out of people's hands. And that was a win for Bobby Bowden over Nick Saban in his first season. I think it was, it was a season a lot of people write off, but I'm sure stung for some Alabama fans. But 2017 is the one that I think sticks in most people's memory. It was a huge, hyped up game to start the season that year. Jalen Hurts was coming in as the starting quarterback for Alabama, and as you said, Jimbo Fisher still there at the time, and there was a lot of the discussion of, can an assistant ever beat Nick Saban? Can a former Saban assistant ever get over on him? It was a relatively close game, if I recall correctly, until about halftime, and Alabama ends up sort of running away with it later. But I think, Ben, the most impactful exchange between these two programs you brought up at the start of the show. 2 years ago, going into that college football playoff, Florida State fans really felt like they were robbed. They felt that the bias nationally towards Alabama and towards Nick Saban cost them a shot at the college football playoffs. And I think a lot of them hold a grudge. I think the Florida State fans really view Alabama as sort of a boogeyman. And I think there will be a lot of heat in this crowd towards Alabama. We'll get into whether I think the team could back it up or not, but I think this is, and I'm trying to think of a equivalent maybe elsewhere in college football. Certainly not one for Alabama, but I mean, honestly, in a little ways, it reminds me of that sort of heat that LSU had for Alabama in the real peak of that rivalry, where it's not so much about what's happening on the field right now. It's more this feeling of, you cost me something. You're the reason I'm unhappy. And I think there's going to be a lot of that coming from the Florida State side of this.
Yeah, I think you're
Personal,
right.
right?
Yeah, I think so. And yeah, I want to get into that in a minute about sort of like, is there a chip on Mike Norvell's shoulder when it comes to Alabama for a few different reasons. But, you talked about the history of the programs, the Bowden part of it, the Bryant part of it, and obviously Saban. My dad went to that game in 2007, and it was just a terrible time for Alabama fans. And the one thing he took away from it was, I think it was halftime in whatever bowl game they played in that Jacksonville stadium.
That's the Gator
during
Bowl, yeah.
halftime. They made this big announcement where they announced a new sponsor for the Gator Bowl, and they set off all these fireworks as if it was like important at all. Like people cared about who the new sponsor was. Anyway, he gets a big kick.
I will say,
that.
I remember there being a T-shirt before going into that game in the RV parking lot. I remember seeing a T-shirt that I'll just say had a phrase that I can't say on this podcast, and it was anti-Alabama. And I saw an Alabama fan walk up to the T-shirt and light it on fire. So that was that was certainly, I think, a good example of the respect these two programs have for each other.
Well, it's interesting, growing up a college football fan, and certainly like in Tuscaloosa, when we grew up, Matt, I mean, as like 90s kids, right? Because Florida State was college football
For sure.
in a lot of ways. Like, I mean, it was like the iconography. I mean, like they even made a movie in the 90s called The Program, where like it was loosely based, at least visually, on Florida State, because it just sort of like signified what college football looked like. And then you had the Miami Florida State rivalry. Florida State was just appointment television whenever they played. Bobby Bowden, Deion Sanders, like all these players who were part of that, and they were national champs, at one point, and then they had kind of a resurgence in the late '90s, obviously with like Chris Winkie and Peter Warwick and that whole deal. So as a fan, it was just like, well, when does Alabama get to play Florida State, and like when are we going to see these two amazing programs finally like on the field at the same time? And so it was kind of a letdown the two times that we've seen them in our lifetime. In 2007, which is kind of a crappy game in Saban's first season, and then in 2017, it was essentially a blowout. It was 24-7, but it was a dominant defensive performance from the team. Their starting quarterback tore his ACL, unfortunately, in that game. So it'd be fun because there would be big buildup. I think, like, again, I mentioned the sliding doors earlier. One of the big ones to me was the kick six probably prevents Nick Saban versus Jimbo Fisher in the final BCS national title game, right? Like if Alabama beats Auburn in that game, they'd likely go on to play Jameis Winston, an Alabama native, and Alabama gets their shot at Florida State.
Both at their sort of peaks, which is definitely a missed opportunity for a number of reasons. But yeah, I mean, look, I think there will not be. I don't know. Nick can inform us about the point spread for this game, but regardless of that, I mean, I don't think this is going to be a game that sounds at kickoff like there is a team that's clearly favored one way or the other. I think at least in the opening moments of this game, there's going to be major crowd heat and hype going into this from the crowd.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's talk about, though, the war of words leading up to this game. Nick, Florida State quarterback Thomas Castellanos, he made headlines this summer when he said, quote, "I've dreamed of playing against Alabama. They don't have Nick Saban to save them. I just don't see them stopping me," end quote. So he was later asked to clarify, follow that up, and he said, quote, "We stand on what I said. I said what I said, and we stand on that. I don't mean no disrespect to none of those guys at Alabama or anything like that. I have confidence in my guys in the work that we've been putting in preparing and preparation we've been putting in together. That's all it was. No disrespect to those guys, but we stand on what I said." And then, Nick, quickly, the response from Alabama players at ACC Media Days, linebacker Deontay Lawson said, "All disrespect will be handled accordingly." So, Nick, have you gotten the sense that Alabama is actually using this as bulletin board material? I mean, do they need extra motivation for this game, or do you think that they're, I guess, more focused on the big picture this season?
Yeah, I asked Deontay Lawson that same question this week. Just, hey, are you guys literally putting this up on weight racks type of deal? Like is this being put around? And he's like, look, it was disrespect to the defense. So they know that. I mean, they heard it. They're not ignoring it. But he said it's kind of back of mind, and I tend to believe him with that, just because, yeah, I mean, it's a reason to be motivated. But if that is the thing that turns you from, just hanging around to, oh, we need to get going. Let's go beat this team. Then you're probably not cut out for this. So I think it adds to the fuel, the fire, if you will. But I don't think it's the sole motivating factor. Like, hey, we got to prove this guy wrong. I think this is step one, chapter one of a season where they're trying to prove that what happened last season was not okay, and it's not the standard anymore, and that's not what you should expect. So I think this is, yeah, it adds something to it, and it's fun for us to talk about, but I don't think that alone is what's going to get guys up for the game in Tallahassee.
What about Mike Norvell? Matt mentioned this earlier. Like, you followed what Norvell and others at Florida State have been saying about Alabama this week. Like, you've got to think, again, that there has to be this kind of chip on his shoulder when it comes to Alabama, because, again, they miss out on the playoff because their starting quarterback is hurt. Alabama swoops in not only to only lose to Michigan in the semifinal. Norvell's name gets tossed around during the Alabama coaching search. We don't really know what happened there, or if he was even really in like serious discussions to be Nick Saban's successor. Do you think that Mike Norvell, Nick, has any extra incentive to win this one?
No doubt. Well, not only that, but I mean, Florida State needs to get right. I mean, they need to get back on track, and Alabama happens to be that first opponent. And more than anything, they just need to give their fans some hope. I mean, 2-10. I mean, that's a brutal season. I mean, I was at Missouri for 4 years, and even it never got that bad. So it is one of those things where you just need to get people believing again. And that's where I don't know that even Florida State has to win this game to get on the right track. They just need to play competitive and give a product that fans are excited about. But yeah, to your point, Ben, I mean, my understanding is that Mike Norvell and Kalen DeBoer were the top two choices to be the next Alabama coach. Now, how it played out from there, I don't know the exact specifics. I'm not confident enough to say on the record what exactly happened between those two things. But yeah, the two paths of Kalen DeBoer and Mike Norvell are going to be worth monitoring just because they were kind of those two top options at that point, the two top realistic options. I mean, of course, you could look at a Kirby Smart or Steve Sarkisian, but my understanding based on people I talked to back then was that, yeah, it was Kalen DeBoer and Mike Norvell that were the two top guys for the spot. And Kalen DeBoer got the job and Mike Norvell stayed at Florida State. And so, yeah, it's very fascinating. How do these two paths go? How do they coincide, and where do Norvell and DeBoer go from here? But yeah, this is a launching point game for Alabama as it tries to get back to championship level, and for Florida State to get back into relevancy. So it's a really fascinating matchup that way.
Yeah. I don't know if Missouri just caught a stray or if that was just a direct shot at Florida State by way of Missouri. But Matt, what does, like, again, if you just kind of like go to the alternative universe of a Mike Norvell Alabama football program, what does that look like?
I mean, that's a good question, because I would say, look, not many coaches would handle a season like what Florida State had to deal with last year in a way that would come off gracefully or impressively. But Mike Norvell certainly didn't. I think he really lost a lot of the juice that he had as a coach and the respect he had nationally in not just the record that was amassed, but Norvell genuinely seemed like he didn't have any answers. I think that there were a lot of moments that he seemed flustered and like the situation was getting too big for him. And, look, he's going to get a shot to redeem himself this year. I don't know that there's going to be a ton of slack on him, which brings some pressure to, if not this game, then the remainder of his season for sure. But he knows, I mean, he can win back a lot of his fan base's confidence if he can pull off a win in this game. I mean, I know a lot has changed, but it is still, I would say, going into 2025, a win over Alabama is a program changer for anybody, including Florida State. So it's kind of a nothing to lose situation for Norvell and Florida State, I would say, because I don't think there's that many people who realistically expect them to win this game, but I think there's so much to be gained from pulling it off. And we haven't even talked about yet, Ben, that there's alongside Norvell, there is a man who has possibly the biggest Bama-shaped chip on his shoulder of anybody in college football, which is Gus Malzahn. And that may be an unfair description, because Gus got his against Alabama probably better than any other coach did during the Saban era. But he's still, look, I have had the opportunity to spend a decent amount of time with Gus Malzahn, and some sort of more in-depth interviews that we've gotten to do with him. That guy really put it on himself that he believes he was a good enough coach to beat Alabama, to create a program that was better than what Nick Saban had at Alabama. And he believed ultimately that X's and O's wise, he was a better coach than Nick Saban. Now look, he's gone through a lot since then. He's moved around a bunch. He's now an offensive coordinator again. But this is a guy that I think carries some personal beef against Alabama. I think he feels probably confident going against this program. He knows that he knows how to drive this place crazy. And, the big question that I will have is, we all know that Gus Malzahn has a very particular way of doing things offensively. How long does it take for a program to get comfortable with that, to understand what that hurry up, no huddle is supposed to look like and how you're supposed to run it effectively? Coming out the first game under a new offensive coordinator, that is a difficult thing to be flawlessly executing it. But it's certainly fair to say that Gus Malzahn knows what it looks like to put together a game plan to beat Alabama.
Well, they blew it. They fired Gus Malzahn, and I know that Auburn fans regret it, and they should. They should regret firing Gus Malzahn.
I agree.
What do Auburn fans really want? They had the architect of the 2010 national championship. They had the architect of the guy who was instrumental in making Cam Newton a Heisman winner and helping them win a national title. They had the guy that took them to the national championship game in his first season as head coach. They had the guy who was responsible for the kick six. They had the guy who won SEC championships. They had the guy who was the Nick Saban slayer, the guy who was probably best in the country at beating Nick Saban. They had the innovator of the spread, no huddle offense, and they threw him away. They didn't want him anymore. So that's on them. I guess we'll see how he does as offensive coordinator as Auburn moves through yet another coach in the post Gus Malzahn era. Something we'll never know. So, Nick, let's talk about matchups here. Let's start with Alabama's defense against Florida State's offense. We've talked about what Castellanos has done off the field and what he said, but what about on it? Like, what kind of challenges do he and the rest of the Florida State offense give Alabama?
Well, here's an important overarching point to make here. Yes, this is a new offense from Malzahn at Florida State, so there's not a bunch of tape, but I think Alabama is studying all that Central Florida tape as much as they can. But the other thing is Nick Saban's not coaching Alabama's defense anymore. It's Kane Womack, who's the defensive coordinator, who knows Gus Malzahn really well because so going back almost, 2 decades ago, 22 years ago to be exact, Kane Womack in high school at Fayetteville in Arkansas was going against Springdale High School, who Malzahn was the coach of. And he's known Gus Malzahn going back to that time because also Kane Womack's dad, Dave Womack, the defensive coordinator for Ole Miss, he was at Arkansas State, Georgia Tech, just a lot of places, Arkansas. He's a guy who knows Malzahn well as Kane. So, and even Dave Womack told me that Gus Malzahn tried to hire him at Auburn, I think back in like 2015 or so. So they know Gus Malzahn's offense really well, as much as you can. Because also, I forgot to mention too, Kane played for Gus at Arkansas. So there's a ton of familiarity there. And so I think that's a fascinating dynamic is, yes, this is a new offense that Kane and the Alabama defense are preparing for, but Kane Womack knows how Gus likes to do things, and he's known the evolution of Gus's offense. So I think that's going to be fascinating to see. But all that being said, I do think Castellanos is a good quarterback for what Gus Malzahn wants to run. One comp I had heard was about Nick Marshall being a guy who he can do maybe similar things as he did at Auburn. So, yeah, we'll see how Castellanos does. I mean, again, I'm not ready to give Castellanos the Heisman or call him Jaden Daniels or something like that, but he does prove a threat with his arm and his legs. So how does that factor in? How does Alabama handle some of these receivers that Florida State has now? There's a little SEC flavor there with Squirrel White from Tennessee transferring over to the Florida State offense. And then, yeah, Roydell Williams, former Alabama running back, is there as well. And I think they have some other running backs they like too. So, yeah, we'll kind of see how that offense comes together. The offensive line is very fascinating to me because Florida State, I think they pretty much revamped their entire offensive line outside of maybe one or two guys, brought in a bunch of transfers. I mean, I don't think their offensive line could be much worse than it was a year ago.
Right.
But can Alabama take advantage of a group that is new? I mean, you talk about cohesiveness. That's maybe the most important position on the entire field in terms of, hey, we've played together. Hey, we have this experience together. We know how to work together. And when you have a new group, they just don't have that cohesion. So can Alabama's pass rush and can their front take advantage of that? So that, to me, is the most interesting matchup is the front seven of Alabama against that Florida State offensive line. Also because Alabama's pass rush needs to step up. And so this could be the first maybe appearance for a new group like a Quay Russaw and LT Overton and just see kind of how they perform in a group that's looking to do better this season.
Nick, I wanted to ask
Let's switch it up here.
Oh, sorry, Ben. I had a quick follow-up here because I know that you've been, Nick, I mean, I know you dig into this stuff. I mean, when you look at Castellanos, right, I'll just from a cursory glance and you see his stat line from a couple of years ago at Boston College, and he rushed for over 1,000 yards, passed for another 2,000. Like then he loses the starting job last year, which is how he ends up at Florida State. So what's like at the same time you look at his history and you say, well, that's a really scary player, but also, I mean, he lost his job at a school that's probably not super loaded with talent. What's kind of the deal there? Like, what is ultimately, what do you know from researching him about why it didn't work out for him at Boston College?
Yeah, that's a good question. To be honest, I think it just wasn't a good fit. I think he's mentioned some things about Bill O'Brien, maybe things not lining up there, which a
Sure.
name Alabama fans know well. But yeah,
They
without
see eye to
speculating
eye
too
with
much,
Castellanos on this. Yeah.
without speculating too much on air, I mean, yeah, I guess I've read different things, but I'm not exactly sure why it didn't work out. But yeah, to your point, if this guy was just the elite of the elite, then I think they would have worked those things out, so to speak. But yeah, well, I mean, I think he's a good player. I don't think he's maybe again Heisman winner, but I also don't think that he's just some chump as well. So he's a fascinating player. Alabama's seen guys like him before. It's not that they've never seen a guy like that, but yeah, if Alabama doesn't mind his P's and Q's on defense, he can make you pay.
Switching it up here, Alabama's offense against their defense. Florida State obviously has talent, including on the defensive line, especially. But will they have enough to slow down what DeBoer and Grubb have in store for with Ty Simpson and all the weapons around him? Nick, I mean, do you think that this is a favorable matchup for Alabama?
I do, especially offensively. To me, if Florida State's going to win this game, it's the offense for Florida State that's going to have to somehow get it done. I don't feel that confident in the defense. Doesn't mean they can't be good. I just think there's a lot of unknowns. Now, I will say their new DC, I believe Tony White is his name. He came from Nebraska, and he's had several top, I think, 25 defenses, top 20 defenses last few years. So he's a proven guy. But yeah, does it actually translate to Florida State being able to slow what I think should be one of the top offenses in college football this season? I don't know. We'll see. Now, the question is, can Alabama get its running game going enough while Jam Miller's on the shelf, so to speak? I think Daniel Hill is a guy who I'm really intrigued to see. I think he could do some good things. But yeah, it's an unknown. Now, the good news is I think Alabama's offensive line is going to be able to create openings and holes for whoever's running the football. I feel good about the Alabama offensive line. Ryan Grubb talked about this week, the offensive coordinator talked about he feels confident in that group. I mean, that was the word he chose. Now, of course, you're probably not going to say, man, I do not feel confident, but I do think that he's got a point with that group. I mean, I think they're in a really good spot. I don't know that they're going to win the Joe Moore Award in 2025, but I do think it's going to be one of the better offensive lines in the SEC. So yeah, I think the running game could be in a good spot. And yeah, how does Ty do handle the maybe a little bit of jitters first start? Maybe there's a little bit of hiccups, but to me, unless the Alabama offense has a bunch of turnovers, I don't see a way that Florida State's defense really slows them down all that much.
Yeah, and Jaden Roberts, a returning starter on the offensive line who is potentially out for this game too with a concussion, dealing with that for the last couple of weeks in fall camp. So that could be a factor, but that may just mean that somebody comes in and gets net reps that they need, and maybe potentially wins the job playing in this game. Who knows? So I'm curious from both of you guys. We've talked about the matchups, but what do you see as the biggest mismatches in the game on either side? Like, where are we going to see Alabama like really exploited? But more importantly, like, where are they going to like really exceed expectations potentially in this game? Matt, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think Florida State's secondary is probably the most at-risk unit for them in this game. They are a group of, it is a relatively newly cobbled together group here. Not anybody that's on the sort of preseason all ACC team. And really Florida State's best, if there's a strong point of their defense, it appears to be that defensive line, in particular the middle of it, which is kind of strength on strength because Alabama is pretty solid on the interior offensive line. So unless they are able to find some way to really put pressure on Ty Simpson, I think Simpson is going to have big windows to throw into to a group of what we are hearing so far seems to be very talented receivers. I think that is Alabama's big opportunity. And I think, anytime you're playing on the road, hitting those sort of big explosive plays downfield early, that's the best possible way to punch that crowd in the gut and knock the wind out of them and take the crowd factor out of the game as quickly as possible. I think getting off to a fast start with explosive plays in the passing game is a huge opportunity for Alabama. It should, in theory, be there. We'll see if they can capitalize on it.
Nick, do you agree? I mean, do you think that Florida State secondary is in trouble, or is there another area with Alabama that you think is good or bad, depending on what the expectations are from fans?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And also, another factoid for you, that Florida State secondary is coached by Patrick Surtain Sr. So PS2's dad is going to be coaching that group for Florida State again. So something to watch there. But yeah, I'll pick another spot, Ben. I'm going to say the Alabama linebacking core against Castellanos, against the running backs, against that group. I mean, the offensive line, of course, they're going against all those kind of groups. But I mean, I think people underrate just how good Deontay Lawson is, how good Justin Jefferson's going to be, and even Nikhil Green. I mean, you got three guys there that are starter types that I think are all going to see time. And I think they're going to be a just real solid foundation for this defense. And I don't know that Florida State's offensive line is going to be able to combat that well. I don't know how well that Castellanos is going to combat that. So to me, I think that's an area that Alabama has a real strength and an edge that, yeah, until we find out what their defensive line, what their pass rush look like, I could pick that just because I don't feel that confident in Florida State's offensive line, but I do feel really confident in Alabama's middle linebackers and especially Deontay Lawson. So I think that Alabama's got a real strength there, and it'll be their responsibility to stop a Castellanos from running and to make sure he doesn't break open plays, because that's another way that could quickly break the back of Alabama's defense if there's just enough plays that the quarterback makes with his legs. I mean, we saw it to an extent with, I mean, it's maybe not a fair comp, but Vanderbilt with what Pavia did, just in the different ways they use the quarterback, use running backs, use different pieces there, that the linebackers need to have a strong game and stop that from happening.
Yeah, I mean, Deontay Lawson is an X factor one way or the other, right? Like, how healthy is Deontay Lawson? Frankly, I'm shocked that he's already ready and is going to be playing in game one, considering when he got injured fairly late into the 2024 season. But very excited that he's back on the field and that he feels like he's full go, because he's a fantastic player and Alabama's lucky to have him back this year. So hopefully he'll help bolster that core like you're talking about. All right, guys, time for predictions. Nick, are you making predictions this year? Are you willing to share who you think will win or lose in this game? Who do you think is going to win?
Sure, why not? I mean, it's not like it's not like it's going to be something that probably is that accurate anyway. So I'll throw something out there, but I just, I mean, Florida State's going to be better. They're not going to be 2-10 this year, but I just don't buy that this is going to be a close game unless Alabama has a repeat of turnovers, takeaway, all that kind of stuff. I think Alabama wins by at least 2 touchdowns, if not more. I think it's a question of not if Alabama wins. I think it's a question of how much Alabama wins by in a game like this. So I'll go something to the effect of, let's say 35, 14, 17, something like that. That's about what I feel.
Wow. Music to the ears of Alabama fans from Nick Kelly. Matt, are you on the same page here? Like, are you as bullish on Kalen DeBoer year 2 debut?
I definitely am less likely to bet on any offense coming out of the gate looking sharp and explosive in week one. In general, I always bet on, not literally, but I'll say I will I will hedge my bets on offenses being a little sloppy, defenses maybe being a bit ahead of things in week one, and I think Alabama's defense ultimately. One thing about the Gus Malzahn offense that we learned over the years, it's so heavily dependent on getting big gains on first and second down with the rushing attack. And as Nick pointed out, that Alabama run defense, I think, is going to be in a pretty good shape. They're going to be confident and experienced. And when you get Gus into, 3rd and 5 plus, that's when that offense is far less successful and really struggles, especially when you don't have a guy who's known for having a super strong arm or anything like that. So I think the Gus offense could get off the rails a little bit quickly. I think Alabama's defense could keep them out of the end zone entirely. I'm going to go 28-6 Alabama.
Man, you guys are predicting blowouts here for Florida. I think Alabama wins. I think Florida State covers. And I think I'm looking at like 33-24 Alabama in this game.
That'll make people nervous, Ben.
Well, like you said, though, it's game one. Even during the Saban era, we would see a Saban team look explosive, but we would see sloppiness even from his teams.
For sure.
And so I think like we see sloppiness. I don't think we're going to see 52-3 like we did with like USC in 2016. I don't think it's going to be anything like that. I would be delighted if that were the case, but I do think that we're going to see Ty. I think I have confidence in Ty Simpson. I think he's going to have a great season. I think he's going to have a strong debut. I'm eager to see weapons like Isaiah Horton in action, a player I want to see make some plays this year and potentially on Saturday. Latsier Brooks. I want to see the depth of that wide receiving room on Saturday. Whether we will or we won't, Alabama's going to do what they need to do to win. I think Malzahn throws something a little weird at Kane Womack and the defense.
To quote our friend from earlier this week, Scott Cochran, run another trick play blank.
Exactly. Yeah. From what was that, the 2009 game? I don't know.
That's right.
But no, I think Bama by 9. That's what I'm going with right now. The cool thing is that we don't know anything. We have no idea what's going to happen, and we're going to find out quick on Saturday what this Alabama team looks like. Finally, we're here. So those are our predictions based on absolutely nothing other than Nick Kelly's expertise as being the AL.com Alabama beat writer that he is. You can find all of his work and also Matt Stahl's on AL.com all weekend and all season. Go follow him at _Nick Kelly, and he's Beat Everyone producer Matt Scalici. Thanks again, guys. Thrilled that you guys could do this. Thrilled that we're finally here. You can find Beat Everyone on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Ben Flanagan with AL.com. Congratulations to you people. Alabama football is back. We'll see you next time.